Hello people, welcome back to another video. Hope you've enjoyed my latest videos down the borders. I've been really enjoying my time down there. It's getting chilly now though, it's getting really cold. The snow is beautiful down there though. Anyway, I want to do something different today, and it was a subject I've mentioned in the past and I was meant to cover, but I've just not got around to doing it. I'm going to do it tonight. I'm in the mood for it, guys. Anyway, it kind of links in with this article here from 2019, but I've done a separate video. I can't remember what video it was. I'll need to bring it back up, but it was about how much land is owned in Scotland, and the Scottish people only own 11% of the land. Scotland has the highest private land ownership in Europe. It's crazy how much land is owned by rich landowners. And like I said before, it ties in with this Declaration of Arbroath, because when the Norman conquest happened, they introduced feudalism, and they gave all these knights and families massive parts of land, and that includes the Stuarts, the Bruces and the Douglases. These were all Normans that were given land that wasn't theirs, and a lot of these families still exist today. Anyway, I'll quickly read you this article that I found that ties in with the Declaration of Arbroath that I'm going to read. So anyway, this is by The Guardian, 2019. Report calls for reform of unhealthy land ownership in Scotland. Commission set up by Scottish Government recommends new powers to split monopolies. Scottish land ownership rules must be radically reformed to reverse the concentration of the countryside in the hands of a small number of ultra-wealthy individuals and public bodies, a major review has warned. The study by the Scottish Land Commission, a government quango, says that in extreme cases where landowners abuse their powers, they could face compulsory purchase or community buyouts. The commission, set up by Scottish ministers who are likely to look closely at its conclusions, found that major landowners behaved like monopolies across large areas of rural Scotland and had too much power over land use, economic investment and local communities. It found that about 1,125 owners, including Highland lairds and major public bodies such as Forest Enterprise and the National Trust for Scotland, own 70% of Scotland's rural land, covering more than 4.1 hectares, 10 million acres of countryside. That includes 87 owners whose holdings total 1.7 million hectares, with some estates owned by the same family for more than 400 years. Scotland's two most powerful private landowners, the Danish clothing billionaire Anders Holch-Paulsen and his wife Anne, and the Duke of Buccleuch, each own more than 80,000 hectares, 200,000 acres, spread across multiple properties. Describing the worst effects of that monopoly power as socially corrosive, the SLC warned, in some parts of Scotland, concentrated land ownership appears to be causing significant and long-term damage to the communities affected. The eventual goal of the Commission would be to break up many large estates. The Commission has not singled out any specific landowners, said owners in many areas had a positive impact, increasing the vibrancy of communities and investing in the local economy. Some were selling off land, increasing diversity of ownership. However, in the worst cases, owners were demolishing cottages, planting large-scale conifer forests, damaging the environment by focusing on deer stalking and grouse shooting, converting homes into holiday lets, or cutting the amount of land available for small tenant farmers. One crofter complained about an unnamed conservation charity keeping the village she lived in like a museum and refusing to allow her to build a home on her croft. As a result, she lived in a caravan for several years. Among a series of recommendations that will be bitterly resisted by many landowners, the Commission has called on ministers in Edinburgh to introduce legal powers to subject large sales to public interest tests in special cases in order to stop owners having excessive power, a requirement for owners of large estates to draw up management plans that involve local communities, power to invest cases where landowners abuse their powers, which can lead to compulsory purchase or community buyouts, new ways to increase the number of small and privately owned estates, farms and forests. Hamish Trench, the Commission's chief executive, said large landowners did not need to behave badly for their power to be an issue. Concentration of ownership, decreased economic opportunities and diversity, that is an unhealthy position to be in, he said. The Competition and Markets Authority, the UK government agency that investigates monopolies, told the Commission Scottish land ownership patterns met the test for monopoly power. That included bodies such as the Forestry Commission, which owns 638,600 hectares, and the National Trust for Scotland, a conservation charity which owns 76,000 hectares. It's fundamentally about changing the system to a more productive and dynamic system of land ownership, and changes needed across all these sectors, Trench said in rural Sweden. He said there are strict rules about protecting the public interest in land sales. Anyway, the point is there's so much land owned by private landowners, and it goes way back to families who were given this land by the Crown, by the Normans, and it was stolen of the Scottish people, and to this day they still have it. So anyway people, I'm going to read you the Declaration of Arbroath that ties in with this. This is why I've got a wee bit of beam about it, about these people. Okay people, welcome back. So here we've got the National Declaration of Arbroath, and it's one of Scotland's most prized documents. And this is a transcription and translation of the Declaration of Arbroath, because the original, well, you don't send yourself the original, so why would you have the original letter? So there isn't an original letter, because the original letter was sent to the Pope. This is a transcription and translation, so it made up bits and bobs. It's a composite. So this most prized possession is already a bit sketchy, guys. So transcription, Latin text according with text in Sir James Ferguson, the Declaration of Arbroath 1320, 1970, page 4 to 10. This text of the Declaration represents Sir James's view of the nearest possible reconstruction of the final version of the letter, no longer extant, that actually went to Pope John the 22nd at Avignon. So this is Sir James Ferguson's view of the nearest possible reconstruction. So what we're going to see here is probably just a lot of nonsense that's been added in, mixed around, just like the Bible in a way. The same what they've done with the Bible, they've done with this Declaration of Arbroath. It's got that touch, it's got that same touch. Anyway, this is a view from Sir James Ferguson, and Avignon, the Pope at Avignon, that was in France, that was the south of France. So it's not over in Italy, it's the south of France, this Pope. Rather than an absolutely accurate reading of the document held in the National Records of Scotland. So this is just Sir James's view, it's not an actual accurate reading. Ferguson has a separate Latin text which he reconstructed from varied readings of the Declaration as found in later manuscripts. See pages 48 and 54 of his book. So already this is, we'll need to research Sir James Ferguson. So this is what you see in front of you is the Latin version. Sanctissimo Patri in Christo ac Domino Johanni. This is the Latin version, because it would be Latin, wouldn't it? We'll go past this and we'll get the translation of the Latin version. So this is a revised version compiled by Alan Borthwick. 2005, based on Sir James Ferguson's The Declaration of Arbroath, 1320, 1970, pages 5 to 11, with reference to A.A.M. Duncan, the Nation of Scots in the Declaration of Arbroath, Historical Association pamphlet, 1970, pages 34 and 37, and D.E.R. Watt, Scottish Chronicon, volume 7, 1996, pages 4 to 9. So this already, just reading these little paragraphs, is making me doubt what we're going to read here is accurate to any degree. So here we're going to begin it. To the Most Holy Father and Lord in Christ, the Lord John, by divine providence, Supreme Pontiff of the Holy Roman and Universal Church, his humble and devout sons Duncan, Earl of Fife, Thomas Randolph, Earl of Moray, Lord of Man and Annandale, Patrick Dunbar, Earl of March, Malise, Earl of Strathearn, Malcolm, Earl of Lennox, William, Earl of Ross, Magnus, Earl of Caithness and Orkney, and William, Earl of Sutherland, Walter, Steward of Scotland, William Soules, Butler of Scotland, James, Lord of Douglas, Roger Mowbray, David, Lord of Brecon, David Graham, Ingram Umfraville, John Menteith, Guardian of the Earldom of Menteith, Alexander Fraser, Gilbert Hay, Constable of Scotland, Robert Keith, Marshal of Scotland, Henry Sinclair, John Graham, David Lindsay, William Oliphant, Patrick Graham, John Fenton, William Abernethy, David Weems, William Mushet, Fergus of Ardrossan, Eustace Maxwell, William Ramsay, William Mowat, Alan Murray, Donald Campbell, John Cameron, Reginald Shane, Alexander Seaton, Andrew Leslie, and Alexander Straighton, and the other barons and freeholders in the whole community of the realm of Scotland, send all manner of filial reverence with devout kisses of his blessed feet. Most Holy Father, we know, and from the chronicles and books of the ancients, we find that among other famous nations of our own, the Scots has been graced with widespread renown. It journeyed from the Greater Scythia by way of the Tyrrhenian Sea and the Pillars of Hercules, and dwelt for a long course of time in Spain amongst the savage peoples, but nowhere could it be subdued by any people, however barbarous. Thence it came, 1200 years after the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea, to its home in the west, where it still lives today. The Britons it first drove out, the Picts it utterly destroyed, and even though very often assailed by the Norwegians, the Danes and the English, it took possession of that home with many victories and untold efforts. And, as the histories of all time bear witness, they have held it free of all servitude ever since. In their kingdom they have reigned 113 kings, their own royal stock, the line unbroken by a single foreigner. So people, this is a very interesting part of the document. And the thing is, see, Scottish people, they didn't really read this whole document, even though it's their most prized document. The only part they really know is about as long as 100 of us remain alive, we will fight for nothing in glory but for our freedom alone. And that sort of phrase just clouds that it's a nationalism. It's just that phrase alone gets pushed into people's faces. So that's all they need to know. They didn't even have to read all the rest of this, which is very important. It's a very important propaganda piece for the papacy. So where do we start with this part here? Most Holy Father, we know, and from the chronicles and the books of the ancient, are the Scots. So these Normans are claiming that they're Scots, and they're going to tell us the history of the Scots here. Widespread renown, it journeyed from Greater Scythia. So the Scots apparently came from Ukraine, because Greater Scythia kind of was centred in the Ukraine region. The most southern part of Greater Scythia was the sea there, the Crimea. So by way of Ukraine and the Tyrrhenian Sea, which is down to Italy. On the west side of Italy, you've got the Tyrrhenian Sea. So they've came down through Ukraine, Italy, and the Pillars of Hercules. So that's between North Africa and southern Spain, the Pillars of Hercules. So they've came through there and dwelt in Spain and lived in Spain for a while. So they became Spanish in a way, I suppose, but kept their own ethnicity. But nowhere it could be subdued by any people, however barbarous. Thence it came 1200 years after the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea to its home in the west, where it still lives today. So 1200 years after the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea. So when did the people of Israel cross the Red Sea? Well, according to biblical scholars in the Bible, it was around 1250 BC that the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea. 1250 BC. So if they're saying 1200 years after, what does that leave us? 50 AD. So according to this, they came into Britain, the West, in 50 AD. And do you know who else came into Britain in around the same time? The Romans. They were around 43 AD. So, are they claiming to be Romans here? Is this a code here to say that they were the actual Romans? Anyway, that's something to think about, and it's these Hebrew Israelites try and tie in the Scots with these Israelites crossing the Red Sea, but if it's 1200 years after, it says in this document, after them, that leaves 50 AD. So think about that. So where were the Irish? So it says here, the Britons at first drove out. So the Britons were the original, like the Welsh, the original English as well. So it first drove out the Britons. So where did the Britons go if it drove them out in 50 AD? That sounds like the Romans, because the Romans kind of drove the Britons out. The Picts it utterly destroyed. Well, in 50 AD there was Pictish kings, right up to Kenneth MacAlpine, who became the first king of Picts and Scots in around 845-848 AD. So how have they totally destroyed the Picts? And even though very often assailed by the Norwegians and the Danes and the English, it took possession of that home with many victories and untold efforts. And as the histories of all time bear witness, they have held it free of all servitude ever since. So, no mention at all about the Irish. It's been kind of proven now the Scots came over from Ireland. But according to this document, well, make of it what you will, should I say. And took possession of many untold efforts as history will tell. In their kingdom they have reigned 113 kings of their own royal stock, the line unbroken by a single foreigner. Well, maybe before the Normans came in and they hijacked this culture, just like the Romans did. And the Romans were culture vultures as well. They hijacked cultures, religions. So, very questionable. They're saying they utterly destroyed the Picts, which is untrue. They said the Britons at first drove out, which is untrue, because they're the Welsh, and the Brythonic language is still linked to the Welsh language, so they must have still existed. The English. So, who are these people? We've got everyone here in Britain, apart from the Irish. So back to the document. The high qualities and merits of these people, were they not otherwise manifest, shine forth clearly enough from this, that the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, our Lord Jesus Christ, after his passion and resurrection, called them, even though settled in the uttermost parts of the earth, almost the first to his most holy faith. So in other words, after Jesus was crucified and resurrected, he called to the Normans, the Scots, as the first, one of the first Christians. This is what it's saying here. Nor did he wish them to be confirmed in that faith by merely anyone, but by the first of his apostles, by calling those second or third in rank the most gentle Saint Andrew, the blessed Peter's brother, and desired to keep him under his protection as our patron forever. So we already know, people, that there were saints in Scotland before St. Andrew. St. Andrews came from Greece. And we know there's St. Ninian, there's St. Columba, St. Mungo. There's all these saints in Scotland, Celtic saints. But you can see this is quite an effort to replace all them with the St. Andrew, the blessed brother of Peter and Andrew, the keys for the papacy. So this is just propaganda, papal propaganda. And don't be under any delusions. Scotland, Ireland were very lucrative back in medieval times for their agriculture, their animal husbandry. Probably the most in Europe. They could feed Europe, these countries. They were so blessed. Anyway, the most holy fathers, your predecessors, gave careful heed to these things, and strengthened the same kingdom and people with many favours and numerous privileges, as being the special charge of the blessed Peter's brother. Thus our people, under their protection, did indeed live in freedom and peace, up to the time when that mighty prince, the King of the English, Edward, the father of the one who reigns today, when our kingdom had no head, and our people harboured no malice or treachery, and were then unused to wars or invasions, came in guise of a friend and ally to harass them as an enemy. So here, they were saying they were living almost like a Garden of Eden before Edward came along. When the Scots never had a war, they were living in peace and harmony. They didn't even know what war was, or invasions. Even though the Vikings, the Normans, the battles, forever Scotland was battling before Edward. So this is just absolute rubbish, making it that the Scots were living in some kind of Garden of Eden before Edward came along, and they didn't know anything of the word war or invasion. It's absolute joke. The deeds of cruelty, massacre, violence, pillage, arson, imprisonment, prelates burning down monasteries, robbing and killing monks and nuns, yet other outrages without number which he committed against our people, sparing neither age nor sex, religion nor rank, no one could describe nor fully imagine unless he had seen them with his own eyes. So they're describing here the violence that Edward puts on the people. But this in medieval times, this was an age where life was cheap, and atrocities were committed on both sides. The atrocities down in Berwick, the atrocities down in York, by both sides. If you look into it, they didn't discriminate over age, race, sex, whatever. Anyway, but from these countless evils we have been set free by the help of him who, though he afflicts, yet heals and restores, by our most tireless prince. Guess who? King and Lord, the Lord Robert. And this is Robert the Bruce, people. He, that his people and his heritage, Normans, might be delivered out of the hands of our enemies, and have land, bore cheerfully toil and fatigue, hunger and peril, like other Maccabeus or Joshua. Another biblical reference just thrown in there just to get the Pope's tears running down his cheeks. Him too divine providence, the succession to his right, according to our laws and customs, which we shall maintain to the death. And the due consent assent, us all have made our prince and king. To him, as to the man by whom salvation has been wrought unto our people, we are bound both by his right and by his merits, that our freedom may be still maintained, and by him, come what may, we mean to stand. And like I said, people, Bruce was jumping on both sides of the border. In fact, he came quite late on. Like he was fighting Edward II for Scotland. He was waiting for Edward I, I think, to keel over, because that was his granddad's pal. His old buddy and knight in the Holy Land, fighting in the Holy Land. Anyway, yes, yet, if he should give up what he has begun, seeking to make us our kingdom subject to the King of England or the English, we should exert ourselves at once to drive him out as our enemy, and subverter of his own right and ours, and make some other man who was well able to defend us as king. For as long as 100 of us remain alive, never will we on any conditions be subjected to the lordship of the English. It is in truth not for glory, nor riches, nor honours that we are fighting, but for freedom alone, which no honest man gives up, but with life itself. So this is the famous patriotic line that most Scots are blinded by, and they forget about the rest of it, which it's quite cringy actually when you start reading it. Therefore it is, Reverend Father and Lord, that we beseech your holiness with our most earnest prayers and suppliant hearts, inasmuch as you will in your sincerity and goodness consider all this, that, since with him, whose vicegerent on earth you are there, is neither wane nor distinction of Jew and Greek, Scotsman or Englishman, you will look with the eyes of a father on the troubles and privations brought by the English upon us and upon the Church of God. May it please you to admonish and exhort the King of the English, who ought to be satisfied with what belongs to him, since England used once to be enough for 7 kings or more, to leave us Scots in peace, who live in this poor little Scotland, beyond which there is no dwelling place at all, and covet nothing but our own. We are sincerely willing to do anything for him, having regard to our condition, that we can, to win peace for ourselves. So it's almost pitiful, can this pitiful little, poor little Scotland can leave us in peace. We don't have anything that's to value. And it's pitiful. On one hand, it's like we have not been defeated. We come from far and wide. We conquered everyone, the barbarous people. And then next minute, we don't know what war is. We were just poor little Scotland. We didn't even know what war was before Edward came along, or violence. So here comes the blackmailing part, where they're blackmailing the Pope. Well, no blackmailing, but it's obvious. This truly concerns you, Holy Father, since you see the savagery of the heathen raging against the Christians, as the sins of Christians have indeed deserved, and the frontiers of Christendom being pressed inwards every day, and much will tarnish your holiness' memory if, which God forbid, the Church suffers eclipse or scandal in any branch of it during your time, you must perceive. Then rouse the Christian princes who for false reason pretend that they cannot go to the help of the Holy Land because of wars they have on hand with their neighbours. So here, in other words, it's tell of these big kings, these powerful kings, to stop picking on the smaller kings, because they've got a Holy Land to conquer, and the little kings need to conquer the Holy Land too. The real reason that prevents them is that in making war on their smaller neighbours, they find a readier advantage and weaker resistance. But But how cheerfully our Lord the King, and we too, would go there, if the King of the English would leave us in peace, he from whom nothing is hidden well knows, and we profess and declare it to you as the Vicar of Christ, and to all Christendom. But if your Holiness puts too much faith in the tales of the English tell, and will not give sincere belief to all this, nor refrain from favouring them to our undoing, then the slaughter of bodies, the perdition of souls, and all the other misfortunes that will follow, inflicted by them on us, and by us on them, will, we believe, be surely laid by the Most High to your charge. In other words, if you do nothing about this, there's going to be death, slaughter on both sides, and it's all your fault. To conclude, we are, and shall ever be, as far as duty calls us, ready to do our will in all things, as obedient sons to you, as his vicar, and to him as the supreme king and judge we commit the maintenance of our cause, casting our cares upon him and firmly trusting that he will inspire us with courage and bring our enemies to nothing. So I think here they're talking about Bruce again. Or Jesus, we don't know here. It's kind of Lord of Lords, King of Kings. They speak about the kings and Jesus, kind of the same thing. May the Most High preserve you to his holy church in holiness and health for many days to come. Given at the monastery of Arbroath in Scotland on the 6th day of the month of April in the year of grace 1320, in the 15th year of the reign of our King aforesaid. So people, that was Scotland's most treasured document, the National Declaration of Arbroath. I hope you can make your own conclusions about it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.